Hey, hey, my fellow truth sisters. This is Petra Williams, the founder of The Red Hot Truth and your fabulous host for this podcast. Of course, The Red Hot Truth is here to give rise to the feminine by helping you be more of who you are, highlighting your difference, letting you live your red hot truth, and of course, blossoming. Today's guest is so exciting. As a kid, I grew up watching The X-Files. Loved it. I loved the idea of extraterrestrial beings being on this earth. I knew from a young age that it was naive to think that we were the only beings in this big, big, big galaxy. And I really wanted to find someone who was able to tell me about ETs, UFOs, and contact. But I didn't want just any old person. I wanted an expert, and boy, did I find one. So Mary Rodwell is recognised internationally as one of Australia's leading researchers and writers in the UFO and contact phenomenon areas. She's a highly acclaimed author and has written books like Awaken, How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life, and she has won many awards for documentaries and all of her other books. Her most recent book, which we talk about in the interview, is called The New Human. We discuss what the new human is, how they are different, and what they are here to do. What I really loved about this interview, what I found most interesting, was when we started talking about people being born with Asperger's syndrome and the rise in numbers because of it, or the rise in numbers of people being born with Asperger's. And it's not because of environmental or environmental issues. It's a totally different reason, which is so exciting. So I trust that you will love this interview as much as I did. Mary's very passionate. She has a lot to say. So just take it all in and see. Maybe the truth is out there. So Mary, hi. Finally, we get it sorted. Welcome to the Red Hot Truth. I'm very excited to be interviewing you today because you are the leading expert, Australian leading expert in UFOs and contact phenomenon. I'm interested, how did you sort of get into this topic in the first place?
Good question, and I've asked it a lot. And first of all, I would like your listeners to know I've come from a very grounded background. I was a nurse and I was a midwife, delivered quite a few babies. So it was really gradually, through my counselling particularly, people started to tell me about experiences that we wouldn't consider the norm. They may be lost somebody very close to them, because I did grief and bereavement counselling. And they would say to me, I often feel mum's around, or they'll say, some strange things have happened since mum's died or dad's died or whatever. And they would sometimes even feel they were being supported from another realm by mum or dad or whatever, or someone really close to them. So I was exposed to what we would call the less normal human experience. Now, with that came my overwhelming interest in the weird and the wonderful, the strange and whatever, because for me, I had a huge curiosity. I wanted to know what it was all about, why we're here. All the big questions were always something I wanted to know. So I read books on anything that was weird and wonderful, and I had, if it was weird and wonderful, I had a book on it. So from that desire to find out, so is there, in fact, another reality? Are we able to tap into it? Where do we go when we die? All those kinds of questions I was asked when I was helping people who were in hospice, who were facing their mortality. And so I would look at books in reincarnation, all those kinds of things. But I'd never really come across anyone at that time that had what we call encounters with non-human intelligences. That was not something I'd looked into. I didn't know very much about any of that, whether it was real or not real. I picked up a book by a former professor of psychiatry, Dr. John Mack, who wrote the book Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens. He was, as I say, a professor of psychiatry, and he did he interacted with a number of people with these experiences, and what he discovered was very important. And what he discovered when he did all the psychological testing, he realized that this for them was absolutely real, and he wrote 2 books, in fact. The other one was Abduction, Human Encounters. The second one was Passport to the Cosmos. Now there's professor of psychiatry saying, you know what, I've done all the testing, I've done hypnosis with these individuals, I believe this is real. So that was very significant for me. Never thinking in a million years I was going to meet anyone who'd had these experiences, because it was rare, wasn't it? So the bottom line was that someone within a very short time came to me and said, Mary, I heard you're open-minded. For this, there's no support groups. For this, they just think you're crazy. And he was an articulate gentleman in his 40s, got a family. His partner was having experiences. He was waking up with marks on his body. She was having strange things. So were the children. The Rellies wouldn't come to the house because they thought it was demons. So he said, can you help? Now, I didn't know whether I could help, but I did know that everything about this gentleman was authentic, in the sense that whatever he was experiencing was real for him, whatever. And of course, I'd read this book by Dr. John Mack. I'd also read another book called Communion by Whitley Strieber, who was someone who'd had experiences and wrote about them. Very famous, very classic. So I'd got a bit of a background, but I still didn't know what this was all about. And I was doing advanced counselling. I took his case to supervision with a whole group of professionals that were learning, psychologists, social workers, uniting minister and whatever. And I presented the case to them. None of them suggested this gentleman was crazy, but they all started to tell me about their weird and wonderful experiences, like I've been in a haunted house, or I've got this. So it opened Pandora's box for them.
Wow.
So I thought, well, if this is human experience, I need to know more about it. And so I started to do my own research. Within a few weeks of this first gentleman, another lady came through the door having experiences. So maybe this isn't so rare after all. And then 20 odd years later, nearly 25, 3,500 people globally have been in touch with me, families, children, scientists, social workers, psychologists, teachers, mothers, farmers, you name it, right across the board. And it didn't matter what they believed in, whether they didn't even believe in aliens, didn't make a difference, because if they were having these experiences, they would then be shown that this is what it was. And they may not have ever watched Star Trek. They may never, and in fact, they say, I don't believe in them, but yet I'm seeing bald-headed guys come into my room. This isn't about belief. This is not about belief. This is about experience, and people having experience and then finding out that others are having it, that they're not crazy, that there are others around the globe that are having it. So that I want to say to your listeners, very important when people say, oh, well, you're a believer. No, this didn't start like that at all. I was certainly interested in all human experience, but I didn't know how real it was when I went into it. And the bottom line is, now I've spoken to people in all cultures, all belief systems, people that have been in the military, that have seen these craft, that have seen these crashed craft, seen the beings. I've talked to whistleblowers. I've talked to people very, right across the board. And for me now, it is an absolute cert that we have been visited throughout our history by what used to be called the gods, but we're not gods, just higher technology.
I was reflecting on this, and I was thinking, I think innately we all know that there's definitely more to life than being born, going to school, going to work, collecting stuff and dying. I think we all know that, and the consciousness of the world is definitely lifting. And the fact that we're having this conversation is already an indication that the consciousness of the world is lifting. And so it's interesting to me how people will say they believe in a God, and yet question extraterrestrials. And I'm like, well, other than, I mean, how else do you know you've actually experienced something? How do you know something to be true unless you've experienced it, unless you have such faith in a God and you question something else? And that's really interesting. It's an interesting dynamic for me. And you did say there's a difference between imagination and experience, because I know that often it's like, well, these people are just imagining these things. What's the difference between imagination and experience then?
Well, first of all, what people don't realize when people have had encounters, there's a lot of high strangeness that goes with that. Sometimes, as I say, they'll wake up with marks on their body, for example, with no, different kinds, shaved areas, different kinds of bruises, this kind of thing. Some have been found to have implants that have actually, these implants have been removed by Dr. Rodwell, who actually had them looked at through a laboratory. He removed, I think, at least 15. They showed anomalies that they couldn't explain from being highly magnetized. What they were made of was unusual and certainly not normally found. So that's another part of its tangibility. Others would find that they'd go to bed with their night clothes a certain way, wake up with the night clothes under the bed or in the cupboard or whatever, with no idea how that happened. They may wake up outside with all the doors locked, so no way they could get outside. And yet there they are. I remember one gentleman in England telling me, in England, being outside naked with the doors locked was not funny, because it's...
Oh, no, I'm sure it wasn't funny for him.
These are things that there are other very significant, and why my work as a hypnotherapist is important, is many have found they've had missing time episodes. In other words, they've maybe gone on, gone to see Auntie Jane that should take 20 minutes or half an hour, and they don't get to Auntie Jane's until 3 hours later. And they've got no idea where that hour and a half or 2 hours and a half actually went. And what we've discovered in hypnosis is often they've been picked up, they've had an encounter and what have you. That's part of the reason they often contact me, is they want to know first, am I crazy? Because that's often the very first thing that they will ask me is, am I going around the bend? Because this is what's going on for me. They may be really scared, understandably so. They don't know why they're being visited, what happens to them, for example. All those kinds of questions come up, as well as wondering whether they're crazy. They find it very difficult to know where to go to get help, because they're afraid if they go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, they'll be diagnosed as ill. And in my book, Awakening, which I wrote to help people through the process, I talk about she was 14 when she went to the doctor saying she was seeing aliens, and he said there's no such thing, and diagnosed her as schizophrenic. And she was on a cocktail of medications till at 19 she contacted me. And the reason she finally realized that this was real, because she saw a talk show from America where they were talking about their experiences, and she realized that this was real after all. And it took her many years to come to terms with the fact that this was a reality. And I wrote his story in my book because I wanted people to see that when you finally realize this is real, that means you've got a whole paradigm shift to deal with, because everything you've ever been taught is not true. Okay?
Yes.
Everything. Because it changes the way you look at everything. The origin of the species, who we are, what we are, what is, our DNA, the anomalies within our DNA comes up. You look at religion, and many people worshipped the gods. Well, the gods, sorry, but a lot of those so-called gods were just higher technology beings that, because of their technology, would appear like gods. So many of those people are worshipping may not actually be gods after all, guys. So that's another thing that is very frightening for someone who's heavily entrenched in a belief system or a religious belief, for example, that the way that they've seen it will change. I have many that have come from different beliefs, Christian beliefs, etc., and others. And when they've had these experiences, they've had to change the way they view their religion. And that can be very uncomfortable and very scary.
Yes.
It's like your whole foundation you've built your life on, you have to start again and look at it from a completely different perspective. And a lot of people don't want to do that. Or if they do, it takes some time to actually accept that this is real, particularly if you're a professional in psychology, for example, or psychiatry. I've met a number of MDs and psychologists that have had experiences, and then it's, oh my God, everything that I've been told about psychology or you know, in terms of multidimensional experiences, well, in psychology, there's no room for that. You're not allowed to be multidimensional. You're not allowed to sense, feel, see things beyond your physical senses, because otherwise you're crazy, aren't you?
Yeah, and definitely, because they have such a narrow paradigm, don't they, of what's, you know, what's sane and what's insane.
Yeah, they'll say to you, you know, do you hear voices? Well, actually, if you have contact with non-human intelligences, there can be a dialogue with these intelligences because they're telepathic.
You described in your book The New Human. I want to look at beyond that. Can you tell me what the characteristics of a new human is? Because it's so exciting what's happening now, because you said there's sort of an upgrade now. Of so would you say it's an upgrade of star children? Is that what the new human is now?
Well, there's lots of names.
Okay.
The thing is, what has been noticed by professionals, and particularly by those in the spiritual, you know, the new age, metaphysics and what have you, they've been calling these new generations of human everything from indigos, crystal children, star children, etc., because they've noticed they're different, and they are different. And I'll explain how we know that in a minute. But also what people haven't realized is a lot of these children have been diagnosed as dysfunctional, who have ADHD, Asperger's, forms of autism, dyslexia, and they see that as a dysfunction. What I have discovered, and I wrote about in The New Human, is those that are having contact experiences in different, and it's intergenerational, so it comes down the family line. If one person's had it, the parents, one of the parents will, or both, and the grandparents, etc. So you get down to the children, and these children are manifesting these ADHDs or dyslexia or whatever. And the whole reason I believe that is they are wired differently, and they're wired differently for a reason. And I believe it's to do with the programming on this planet that's inaccurate, that is limiting. In other words, we're all programmed to ignore our multidimensional self, our sensing, feeling, knowing, seeing, maybe spirits. It's all a bit dodgy, isn't it? It's all a bit not quite okay and whatever. We're programmed to believe that's not okay, that there's something wrong with you. And the only reality is where your your five senses, touch, feel, and see, are the only things to trust. That is not the case. And we all know that.
Because you call it, we live in a 3D world. And I remember reading that one of the children said that school programs the light out of us. And I was like, because I used to be a teacher, and I reflected on that. And I also grew up in South Africa during the apartheid era, and the end of the apartheid era when Nelson Mandela was released, and just how, I mean, I know the history was changed, you know, and just the programming, and I so believe that. I think we really are programmed out of our light, and I often look at kids going to school, you know, with their big hats and their big bags, and the parents are so excited, and I say to my husband, I said, I feel sad for these children because they're now going to lose all of their gifts, you know, and I think we really have to do something about the education system.
Well, I'm approached by educators, psychologists that are seeing these new kids that are, they're what I call the more awake professionals, if you like. And I'm meeting a lot of the awake professionals that are seeing and knowing something's going on. And the whole point is that until psychology accepts we're multidimensional, and that we can sense and feel and see and get information from our non-physical realm, when we finally get that, we can actually start to be whole. Because at the moment we're going around with one eye closed, because all we're being shown is 3D is the only reality, which is BS. It's absolute BS. Because many of the people that have encounters with non-human intelligences, their multidimensional side starts to expand. They start to see energy fields. They start to see orbs. and interact with them. They may start to see the beings. They may start to look at you and know what you're thinking, because many of these children are telepathic. And you don't know that until you start to realize, as the parents have said to me, you know, it's very hard when your child reads your mind. And they do. Children have talked to me about it. The children have talked to me. You know, I remember a 13-year-old saying, Mary, my problem at school is that what the teacher's saying and what the teacher's thinking are two different things. And what she's thinking isn't very nice.
Wow.
What I'm saying to the parents that have these new kids is that you want to be careful, because they are sensing from you lots of things that you don't realize they're sensing. And some of them are highly empathic. They can tune into you and find out whether you're telling the truth or lying. For example, I remember a 7-year-old telling me that he could tell the difference between the truth and lies. And I said to him, how do you feel when, you know, how do you know and how do you feel? He says, when they're lying to me, I go all cold. But when they are telling the truth, I become warm. So he actually, that's how he tells the difference. We have got these kids across the planet. So people are saying, well, why? What is this all about, this upgrade of human? And you have to look at the fact that, first of all, we're hybrids, and that goes into the DNA. And I go into the DNA in the new human quite specifically. That's my
Yeah, you talk about anomalies.
Yes.
How do you say that?
Anomalies in the DNA. And this
yes, it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's come from molecular biologists and whistleblower geneticists that have said there is no doubt that we've been engineered. And Dr. Francis Crick, co-founder of the DNA Molecule, said the same thing, that he knew that we were intelligently designed. And so who designed us? And the information in my research suggests at least 12 different species of non-human intelligence have input in our DNA.
Wow.
So we went from Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, to Homo sapiens, sapiens with twice the brain size, for example, all to do with higher psychological functioning. No way we could evolve like that in that kind of missing link period. So there's that, to me now, just go into that for anyone who's not, you know, who isn't aware of that. So, okay, so if we've been designed by these non-human intelligences that have been visiting this planet as gods for however long, why of a sudden are they upgrading humans? Well, I'll tell you why. The reason they're upgrading us now is because we are very primitive and still killing each other just because the skin looks different or whatever else difference. And they're saying it's time you grew up, because we've now got technology that could destroy the planet. The only way to make sure we shift consciousness is to change the programming, to alter programming. And the programming that we've been having over the last, especially in the Western mind, it's mechanistic, it's materialistic, it's not about owning any kind of spirituality at all. It's saying, you know, you're just a biological body. Well, we know we're not just a biological body. There's so much research into consciousness now, from near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, people who remote view, those in the spiritual mediums who see spirits and whatever, you know. So it's really showing us that our consciousness is separate from our physical container, but is what is our life force, is our essence, our soul, our spirit. And so that's the bit that gains all the experience often when they go aboard craft, because it's not always physical. 25% is physical, 75% is out of body. In our dream, the dream where we see ourselves on a spaceship, for example. Oh, that was a really interesting, I dreamt I was on a spaceship. And they're still remembering that dream 10 years later. What I'd like to say to people is that probably wasn't a dream.
In order for the new to come up, the old has to crumble. And the old is crumbling, and which is so exciting. And I think also that's why now there might be more influence from, you know, ETs and extra-dimensional things, because we are now ready to receive that. So I think it's fantastic.
It's absolutely, I feel, what they've said is, and there's been so much more activity in our skies since, you know, the atom bomb and what have you. Once we became nuclear, for example, the sense was from those that have had experiences with these beings is you've got to stop doing what you're doing, not only for your technology, but look what you're doing to the planet. You're polluting the planet, you're destroying the planet. This is not the way you must treat and also treat each other. So it's if you like, an accelerated program of evolutionary program, if you like, to raise consciousness, for want of a better word. And to do that, they've needed to have a new kind of human. And so a lot of the children that are being born now are upgrades. They're a lot more awake. I mean, I have children that talk to me at 5 and 6 and 7 and their parents about coming here from other places, from other star systems, what they look like in this other place. They may not have been humanoid. They may have been another kind of form, for example, or intelligence. And they're remembering it. They're remembering coming in and incarnating. One young 10-year-old told me this was his first Earth incarnation, that he'd never been to planet Earth before, for example, and he's come in with a mission. He's got a job to do with the pollution of this planet. I had an 8-year-old tell me he communicates with animals because people have to start understanding that all animals have a consciousness and we need to treat them with respect. So a lot of these new children coming in are very aware, very awake, and they're seeing spirits. They're seeing these non-human intelligences. They're aware they're going on spacecraft and being taught how to use these abilities.
And I just quickly want to talk about walk-ins. I thought that was such an interesting dynamic as well. Tell us what a walk-in is. I love this so much.
The walk-in really is another level of looking at the property of the soul. We've got often a very limited idea of what our soul or our spirit can do. And we think, once it's incarnated into human form, it's stuck there until we die. Well, that's not the case. First of all, we know it's not the case because of those that have had near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, etc., which is showing that the essence, the soul consciousness, every night we go out of body most of the time. We have experiences. We go to other realities, etc. So our dreams are part of that experience as well. So that's the first thing. So although it's in the body, the physical container allows us to be operating on this reality, we also have a multidimensional side of ourselves that's operating multidimensionally. And that's how we can often interact with these non-human intelligences. So in that case, one of the things that I also learned about the property of the soul is when an 8-year-old explained to me that when he was on board spacecraft, every so often he would evaporate out of his physical body and go into the form of a mantid being, and he would operate in that mantid form. So although he still had his human body, he was for a time visiting another form and being part of that form. I've had others describe to me that on board craft, sometimes they'll be in another form and their physical body will be waiting for them, their human body. And when they're done, they'll explain this ball of essence or light will then re-inhabit their human form again. So it seems like, even although we've agreed to be in this human body, our essence can go and be in other forms for a time. Now, the walk-in is slightly different to that, because my understanding of the walk-in is there's one where one soul decides to be in that physical form for a certain length of time. When it's achieved its objectives, rather than waste the body, and they may have agreement with another soul to come in and inhabit it and take it on, if you like a second-hand car, really, a bit like that. Because they've both got different agendas. So for those, that's their experience. And they, I say, how do you know? Some are aware of it more than others. The ones that become aware of it say, all the memories I still have, but I don't have any emotional connection to them anymore. Because it's like, that was somebody else's memories, it's not mine, so it isn't relevant. And those around them will notice that they behave differently, their focus is different, their likes and dislikes are different, and the most aware ones will know where they're from. And I've met a wonderful lady who lives in Sydney, actually, who is a walk-in, and she'd had multiple near-death experiences where the old soul that was there prior to her was one that had been very sick, and had been basically sent home to die. And she was visited by what we call light beings, who healed her, but they made an agreement with her that she would continue on with her mission. What happened was, at some point, this soul decided to vacate, and this new soul came in. And this new soul has told me that she's from another dimension, the 13th dimension. And she's come because she's saying her job, her mission, is to help human beings understand more about who they are, and to explain more about who these other intelligences are in a human form, so it doesn't confront people.
And you did say that we all are born with these abilities. We have, we do have, like you, I don't fancy the word psychic because it has so much attachment to it. Clairvoyant abilities, telepathic abilities. I mean, just for us, that intuition is already that essence. How can we tap back into those, or how can we just, even if we wanted to connect with ETs or the higher power or the consciousness, whatever we choose to call it, how can we do that by ourselves?
It's a good question, and I'm asked it quite a bit with those that want to expand and open up and experience more. First of all, we all have the ability to do that. That's the first thing. There aren't just those that are gifted that are the only ones that can do it. They may be more able to tap into it than somebody else, simply because they may have more confidence in it than somebody else. But we all have that innately in us. But what happens is, of course, is as we go and get educated, we're educated out of our multidimensional awareness. So we start to distrust our intuition. We start to distrust that feeling, I shouldn't have really gone out, because they ended up by having, an accident or something, because they felt something bad was going to happen. Or just before they're about to phone someone, the person phones them.
Yes, it's great.
That's such a common one. The more you accept the synchronicities or coincidences or whatever, the more that you want to open up, the more that things will happen that will open up for you. It's all about intent. As you're putting out that frequency, I want to expand, I want to open up. Meditation's a good way to go for most people, just going and being more creative, for those that want to, some people want to go learn healing. So they'll go and learn a particular healing model. Actually, everyone can heal and do energy work. They believe in it. They don't necessarily have to use a protocol. You've just got to want to do it. It's all about telling the essence, your consciousness, I want to shift, I want to change. That is giving permission then to the other wise part of you to start bringing in synchronicities, to bring in new ways of guiding you to a particular book. All of that is your multidimensional.
I love that.
Isn't it? It really is up to you and what makes your heart, feel excited, because
that's true. And that's what the show's about. The Red Hot Truth is saying, I present different ideas and modalities and and concepts, and I say to people, give some of this a go to come back to your truth now that this aeroplane's flying out, because we are really educated out of our truth. And my whole intention is always to help people come back in and come back to finding their truth in different modalities. I'm with you there. Give stuff a go. Be open to the experience. Give it a go. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it's just that openness that we really need, that real heart space. So I can speak to you for hours, I think every person who interviews can. I'd love to ask you just what is your mission with all this amazing work you're doing? You're continuously interviewing people. You're continuously helping people. Is there a mission that you have with your work, or an intention?
My mission really is to encourage people to be all they can be, and that means open up to your multidimensional self. Start being aware that you've got this intelligence around you that is supporting you, whether you call them spirit guides, whether you call them your angels, or the bald-headed
Universe,
or the
whatever.
universe, doesn't matter. But
Yes.
start listening to yourself, start listening to your own resonance rather than other people's truths, because they may not be yours, so that you can accept. So my mission would be to change psychology. It's not just psychology. But the point is that modern psychology has done so much damage
Yes.
to people because it doesn't allow you to be multidimensional. It doesn't allow you to honor your consciousness, your multidimensional self. And that is what makes sense of the third dimension, because otherwise you're going around like this. You need both eyes to see who you are, what you are, and make sense of this 3D reality. So until you start opening up to this, you're never going to make sense of this. So if I have a mission, it's to say to people, be authentic, be yourself, say what you want to say, and have the courage to stand up and speak your truth. If there's a mission at all, it's that.
Sorry, Mary. Go ahead.
That would be it, really.
I was thinking about you and the work you do, and I wondered if you ever thought or realized or acknowledged that you have been chosen to do this work.
Yes, I'm pretty certain that my soul self, before it came here and agreed to come, I agreed to come as long as they kept it interesting, because I'm not very good with boredom. So I've actually said to my non-human team, keep it interesting and I'll hang around. So they're keeping it interesting. But I need this desire to know, for me, the curiosity of what is the truth. What does matter? The mystery. I want to understand the truth of what is going on this planet. And that, to me, is the most important thing of all, is us, getting at the real truth of why we're here. But I'm pretty certain that I came in because I wanted to help. Because that's always been something that's had the most meaning for me. I always remember, and that comes from the religious side, is when you have talents, to use all your talents, not sort of bury them and forget about them. And I've always thought, when I leave this planet, I'd like to know, at least feel that I've done a little bit to making a difference. And that, to me, will be my legacy, hopefully, that I've left a few people in a better place because of me being around. And that'll do. That'll be my vote.
My favorite question is always, what is your red hot truth and how are you living it? But you have just answered that question so beautifully. And and I really acknowledge you for what you are doing. And I think you are really achieving that. And it's so wonderful. I am so appreciative of your time. Thank you for your patience with me again today. And read Mary's books. Really great. The New Human. Yes, Awakening. And amazing.
Okay.
Because it was called Awakening. What was it called? Awakening.
Awakening, how extraterrestrial contact can transform your life.
Transform your life. I love that. Yes. And then this human. Mary, thanks again. You're a rock star. And when you do come and do something in Sydney, we'll be there. Exciting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, Truth Sister. I trust that you love that interview as much as I did. Hey, please remember to share this interview with all of your fabulous truth sisters out there globally. You know the Red Hot Truth is here to give rise to the feminine by helping women live their truth, by helping them stand out, by being who they truly are and highlighting their difference. The world is begging for feminine leadership, and we need to stand together and take the reins and really run with it now. The time for us is now. No more talking, it's time for doing. So please share this, subscribe, leave your comments, and help us help you be your true, authentic, fiery, feminine, female self. Thank you. It's a wrap. Ciao, Bella.